Now, would you help us welcome our speaker from this evening, Bob B. from the Big Book Revealed, Big Book Step Study on Zoom from North Kingston.
Those are the bomb. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bobby. I'm an alcoholic. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. It's a pleasure to celebrate our holiday week and Thanksgiving by being together in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's an honor to be asked to be speaking at a meeting. And when Joe asked me to speak and he said, you'll have an hour or close to it, I thought to myself, that's a pretty long time. I can go 20, 25 minutes and really belt out a strong message for you. And as Jess was said, I host an online Big Book Step Study. It's called Big Book Revealed, and we do it on Tuesday evenings. And then I have a friend that I met online, believe it or not, and we co-host one together on Thursday evenings. And as we approach our Zoom meetings and different studies and things of that nature, there's always that quiet period where we seek prayer and meditation and some kind of guidance and direction in that way. So knowing that we were coming here and that I was coming here, of course, I always ask for help. So I just simply asked for a little bit of guidance, and all I got was, you're going to tell the long version tonight. You're going back in time. And ironically, I was driving here, and I tried to think to myself the last time I actually spoke to what it was like when I was drinking versus, carrying that message of the spiritual experience, and I just can't remember. It was well over 10 years ago since I spoke to it. So let's see what comes to be. Let's see what comes to happen, and let's see what kind of message God can pull out of this for us tonight. So I said I'm an alcoholic. I didn't know that I was an alcoholic as I grew in my drinking. I started drinking in the neighborhood with the neighborhood kids. I grew up on both sides of the city. I spent weekends here on this side of the city with my grandparents as my mother and father were divorced, and so my mother could work. We were here, and then during the week I was on the other side of the city. So I lived two lives. One was during the week and then one was on the weekends. And this was my parish growing up, and I was here on Sunday mornings or Saturday afternoons, depending on which way the wind was blowing in my family and who was taking us to church. And most times that fell on my grandmother's shoulders. And she became the rock in my life. So growing up on both sides of the city, I actually lived two lives. It was pretty cool. I enjoyed it. I didn't mind it. What led to it and how it all came to be really wasn't that pleasurable, and I hope that I can speak a little bit to that tonight. So growing up on the other side of the city, it's a different experience over there on that end, on the west end of the city versus the east end of the city. And I know this because I enjoyed both sides. So living over there was a little bit easier for me. I started drinking at a young age. I think I was 12 years old, somewhere in there. My entire neighborhood grew up on Narragansett Beer and Ballantine Ale. We had the brewery in our city at the time. It's I don't even know where the Narragansett Brewery is now. But ironically, I've been sober well over 36 years, and I can still taste Narragansett Beer. I can still taste it. I'll never forget what it tastes like. I'll never forget what Ballantine Ale tastes like, because that's what I drank growing up. The gentleman who lived across the street from us with a family of like maybe 7 or 9 kids, he was a foreman at the brewery, and which meant that we had this unlimited supply of beer. And that's just the way we grew up. Most people will have in their 2-car garage in between the cars maybe like a snowblower in the winter or a lawnmower in the summertime. They had cases of beer stacked up. And so we drank warm Narragansett Beer in the summertime, and we drank cold Narragansett Beer in the wintertime because the refrigerator was not something that we had access to. So drinking in my neighborhood was normal. It was just, it was just a normal thing to give a kid a sip of this or a bottle of that, or because there was no thought or care to what could happen. There was no thought of perhaps this becoming an illness or an issue or a problem or alcohol becoming a dominant thing in their life that could actually just hurt them and destroy them. None of that was there. So there was no maliciousness in giving the kids the alcohol. It was just the way it was. It was the 70s, you know, and that's where I grew up. Drinking in the beginning was a peer pressure thing. I should say as I got older, it became a peer pressure thing as we explored different types of alcohol and different ways of drinking and other products and dry goods and things of that nature. And coming where I come from, I was afraid of being abandoned, and I didn't want them to say, screw him, and you know, toss me by the wayside. So I went along with the crowd. That's what I did. If I look back in hindsight and I look back at some of the people that I grew up with, a lot of them weren't alcoholics. A lot of them didn't become alcoholics. I became an alcoholic. I don't know why I became an alcoholic. I don't question why I became an alcoholic. I don't question why my experience was entirely different than theirs. I've come to accept it wholly and actually admire the fact that I actually know what the hell what was wrong with me. And I just never knew what that was. So in the beginning, when I started drinking, there was this I want to call it the power of choice. The first step of Alcoholics Anonymous reads, we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. None of that came into play when I started drinking. There was no powerlessness. There was no unmanageability. I was a kid. I had the power of choice. I could choose when, where, how, who, and what I was going to be drinking. And so I could put it down, right? I could have like a couple of beers and stop. I could have shots and stop. I could have a shot and a beer and stop. I could do this dry good and a beer and a shot and stop. I could choose when, right? A lot of people, or years ago when I first got sober, they used to speak to this invisible line, and they didn't know where they had crossed this invisible line. And I don't know when I crossed the invisible line, but quite frankly, when I did cross the invisible line, there was probably just like an inkling of awareness that I don't have control here anymore. But realistically, there was nothing in my life that was being destroyed as a result of it. So nothing was being affected by it. So there was no need to really pay a lot of attention to it. So I just kept drinking. Like, what does it matter, right? So I think I started drinking 12, 13 years old, somewhere in there. I can tell you that in the beginning, I had the power of choice. In the beginning, I could moderate. I was a hard drinker at times, things of that nature. I crossed the fine line somewhere, and then I became an alcoholic. And then that was it. All bets were off. I got sober at the age of 18 years old. I drank for 5 or 6 years. That was it, right? So eventually I crossed the fine line, and I start entering into the period where I have no control. And as a result of having no control, now I'm doing things and saying things and behaving in ways, but not only that, I'm starting to feel and think in ways that I had never done before, where alcohol in the beginning was some type of a medication, and it helped me to understand or tolerate life and the stream of life out there. Now it really wasn't working. It wasn't a medication anymore. Now it was just exacerbating anything I had inside. Right? There was a lot of information that I came upon as I got sober and stayed sober in Alcoholics Anonymous that didn't come to me until I was years in recovery. And if there's any message that I can give to you tonight is, if you're new and you don't know what the hell's going on, find out. Right? Just find out exactly what's going on. We're blessed to be part of a fellowship. Your opening is absolutely brilliant, recognizing the 3 legacies, recognizing the 36 divine principles that we live by, recognizing the idea of anonymity. But the brilliance in all of this is the idea that your opening grounds you in the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. So if you're sitting here tonight and you really just don't know what the hell's going on and why you're sitting in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, I would say to you this. We're sitting in an AA meeting the day after Thanksgiving, decades after Alcoholics Anonymous is founded and the literature, first piece of the literature is printed, And we're still relevant today, all these decades later. This book is still a guiding force in the halls of Alcoholics Anonymous, and so many of us can recover as a result of it. And my message to you would be this: don't wait as long as I did before you do the work, before you explore, before you question, before you wonder, before you go find God, right? Because that was my downfall in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but let me tell you what happened. So as an alcoholic, I drank. There were moments of clarity where, as I was drinking, and I haven't spoke to this stuff in so long, but there were moments in clarity where I knew that there was a problem. But like I said, when you know that there's a problem, but there's really nothing that's the unmanageability as a result of having that problem isn't really showing itself yet, then you just keep going, right? So the powerlessness, to me, I could discount very easily. I could just push it aside and say, it's really not that important. But there were moments when I had no choice but to look at it. I can remember having a job in high school, landscaping, and it was on Saturdays and Sundays. It was the fall. It was like this. We were out cleaning yards, and I can remember being out with my friend David, and it was after a night of drinking all night on a Friday night as kids, and then we got in the pickup truck the next morning, and we're picking up leaves, and I'm exhausted, I'm beat, I'm hungover, it's hotter than hell. I can smell my own breath, I can smell my body, I can smell the beer and the booze off my body, and I'm disgusted, and it's horrible, right? And here's the thing, I kept working, but here's the other thing, I couldn't wait to just go drink some more, right? And that is part of the equation that made me the alcoholic. I needed more, right? Physically, my body wanted more. And I wasn't even sober. I was still hungover and drunk from the night before, but I was looking for more to keep my body in the flow and keep it going. And because we were working and I couldn't do that, now my mind is just like nonstop all day long. Where some people, maybe normal people, maybe non-alcoholics who are landscapers and people that work outside and things of that nature, they might be enjoying the smells of the fall, the colors of the leaves, the crisp air, the fact that it's really, really nice out. We live in New England, right? This is a great place to live in the fall. Not me. There's no way, right? No way. All I can think of is beer. All I can think of is shots. All I can think of is, where the hell am I going to get my drink, right? So my drinking went from having the power of choice to absolutely no choice. So I'll speak to it after, but I did things in my life that I swore I would never do. They speak to it in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, where they speak to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. I can tell you that in the beginning, especially as I'm standing in this church, this building, a parish that I grew up in and shared with another parish on the other side of the city, where I was taught that God is real, prayer works, and that faith is important, I let go of all of that the first day I picked up a drink. Alcohol became my high power, right? And the thing is this, at the end of my drinking, I, even though drinking was destroying me, would not let go of it, right? Because I had this delusion that tomorrow is going to be different. Later on is going to be different. Next month is going to be different. There's nothing wrong with me, right? I became so sick and I just didn't even know, right? I had this compounded ignorance that they speak to. I didn't know that I didn't know. I was just absolutely toast, right? In the end of my drinking, I would wake up in the morning every day with the horrors. Where am I going to get it? Who am I going to get it? What can I steal to sell, to get the cash to get it so I can sell it? Where the fuck am I getting a drink today? It was like that every day. Yes, I threw the F-bomb in there, but that's exactly what it was like. It was nonstop, right? And I had those horrors in the middle of the day too, because if I ran out of booze and I couldn't get you to get me drunk, the horror started all over again. It was just this vicious cycle, just over and over and over again. And that's no way to live, right? Now that's my own personal hell. That doesn't even include what I did to everybody around me. I destroyed people, right? I grew up in a home that was destroyed by a divorce. My mother and father split. My grandparents jumped in. My grandparents became parents. My uncle became a father, things of that nature. So I can't say that, oh, woe is me and poor me. I wasn't loved or things of that nature, because these people in reality were there. They were just as sick as some other people in this world. But the fact of the matter is, I had more than most, right? But I used every negative aspect of my life to justify all my own colorful behavior. All those things they tried to teach me before I started drinking in the way of morals and values and principles and things of that nature went by the wayside when I started drinking. They went by the wayside deeper and deeper as I continued to drink. And in the end, that's what I ended up with, that pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. Whatever morals and values I had, gone. I didn't care. I didn't care what it cost to get a drink. I was going to get a drink. If it was going to hurt you, I was going to do that. So it's safe to say that at the end of my drinking, I had nobody in my life. I drank everybody away. They used to say that alcohol is a great eraser. And it's funny because I have not spoken to this stuff in a million years. So to hear these words again, it's pretty funny. But that's what alcohol became. It became the great eraser. It just took everything away from my life. 2 weeks before I was supposed to graduate high school, I went into a rehabilitation center. You guys mentioned the idea that you have commitments at AdCare, which is absolutely brilliant. I was in a place called High Point, which is actually the same exact building. And at the age of 18, 2 weeks before I was supposed to graduate, I could no longer do it anymore. Last weekend, I was out with a friend of mine, and he was the gentleman that drove me to the school, the high school that I went to, the morning that I walked in and said, I'm leaving school, I'm going to a rehabilitation center. And of course, I think they were all clapping and cheering as I walked out the door because they were tired of my shit. And they were like, see ya. We were out to dinner last Saturday night, and we were speaking to all of this. And it's funny because we get together certain times of the year, and every time we get together, I always have the opportunity to say thank you to this gentleman. And this gentleman still drinks. He still does dry goods. He still does stuff like that, but we're still great friends. And he doesn't have a problem with it. He knows that I had a problem with it. And so it was a nice opportunity to say thank you. So at the age of 18, I went into a rehabilitation center 2 weeks before I was supposed to graduate high school because I just could no longer function anymore. This was after a weekend of being out there. I can tell you that the level of respect that I had for my mother and her home and my sister who lived in that home was absolute zero. I didn't care what my mother said to me and things that she tried to do to get me sober, but I can tell you that everything she said to me and everything she did for me to try and get me sober created a level of doom, or added to that level of doom that I was feeling, and certainly was a part of the process. Back then, in the 80s, they called it tough love. And if there was any kind of campaign or war that my mother could call tough love, my mother was a general. She was a 5-star general, and she used to beat the shit out of me. And I can remember like being in my bedroom all blown out, and she'd say, there's some guy at the curb, he wants to talk to you. And I'd go out and I'd sit in this guy's car, and it was a state trooper, and he'd say, we know what you're doing, this, that, we know you got da. And it had no effect on me, right, at the time. Right? Then she'd say, all right, there's another guy out there who wants to talk to you, and it'd be some guy from an employee assistance program at some company that I had nothing to do with. She had nothing to do with, but it was just some guy that she knew that knew something about alcoholism, and he just was willing to talk to me, right? It's that 12th step in action. And he would talk to me, and he'd say, blah, 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 and I'd say, yep, I'd dismiss him, and I'd yes him to death. But all these little things had a bearing on what was going to happen the weekend that I hit bottom. I can remember being in high school, and I was at the other high school on the other side of the city, and we had counselors within the school, and it was actually Kodak. And I'll never forget the counselor that I had. Her name was Janet. I won't give you the rest of her name. I don't know if she's still alive, but she tolerated me while trying to show me and tell me things about alcohol and alcoholism. And so it was more of an education thing. If you drink, this is what's going to happen. If you do this drug, this is what's going to happen. And ironically, I think I taught her more than she taught me. But the thing is this, she was a safe place to speak to all of this stuff. And it was a way for me to put it outside of what was going on in my head and my heart, and be able to put it on a table and somebody to say, you have a problem here. I had a confidant in the vice principal, and that was why I had to go to that school that day to go say goodbye, because I had so much respect for him. He tolerated all the stuff that I put him through. And so there were people along the way that led up to this weekend. The last weekend that I was out there, I didn't come home. I can tell you that I had zero respect for my mother and her home and my sister, as I said. And I can remember being out there, and my next door neighbor, who I grew up with, he was a drinking buddy. He went to High Point, and you know, he got pinched by the police for something, and they gave him a choice. You can go to prison or you can go to High Point. Now, any good alcoholic's going to go to High Point, because they can realize a treatment facility, because they realize that eventually they might be able to drink again. So that's what he did. He went to this treatment facility. So I lost my drinking buddy, right? And he was gone for 30 days. And then he came back, and he was full of the AA, right? He was full of piss and vinegar, and he was like, you know, like now he wants to 12-step me, he wants to get me sober. I don't know what you guys are like as an alcoholic, the last thing I want to hear when I'm drinking is anything about the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, or Alcoholics Anonymous, or the first step of Alcoholics Anonymous, or sponsorship, or joining a group and getting active. And I want nothing to do with any of that stuff. I'm just looking and thinking about that next drink. That was my life, right? That was the center of my life. So this particular gentleman, while we were drinking, I'll never forget, for Christmas one year, he gave me a gallon jug of Southern Comfort. It was a handle, right? And the legal drinking age at the time is 21. I believe it's the same now. I have no idea. But I was 18 years old, 17 years old, and I can remember him giving this to me, and I would proudly put it on the dresser in my bedroom, you know, like in a defiant way, like, screw you, Mom, screw your house, screw everybody, it's all about me, because that was God to me. That bottle was God. And I called it the last resort, right? I don't know what it was like for you guys when you were drinking. I don't know how resourceful you were, but if I could get you to get me drunk and I didn't have to put anything out of my pocket to do it, that's kind of my MO, right? Like if it's free, it's for me, and if it's not free, I'm gonna find out a way to make it free, whether I have to steal it and sell it, get the cash to go buy it. That's what I mean. Demoralization, no principles, right? So I called this bottle the last resort, because if I couldn't get you to get me drunk or give me something and get me there, I always had that. So I was that type of drunk where I kind of protected what I had going on, because I knew by experience that if I go a day without drinking, or even a half a day without drinking, I'm in trouble. Physically, I'm in trouble. And then mentally, I'm in trouble too. There were two parts to it that were just absolutely excruciating. That's where I landed, right? And on that last weekend, I went and spent the entire weekend away from my home. Previous to this, my next door neighbor graciously called me one evening and said, I'm going to take you to a meeting. And I said, oh, the hell you are, right? So this gentleman who drove me to my school to say goodbye to the vice principal before I went to treatment, I remember calling him up and saying, Mark, you got to get over here. I said, they want to take me to one of those meetings, right? and he was like, I'll be there in 5 minutes. Made it to the house. We did a little dry goods and whatnot, had a few shots, and off we went to the meeting. And it was not an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. It was a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. And I'll never forget it. It was Warwick. It was Warwick Central. It was downstairs in the basement where the Tuesday night meeting is now. And it was cold, or it felt cold. And we walked into the meeting and I was smashed. And the secretary sat behind the table and he wore a big cowboy hat. And this is what I heard him say. Now, this is not what he said, but this is how delusional I was. Mm-hmm. He said, in my mind, if you're here tonight and you're using, don't come back. I've never heard that in a 12-step meeting in my life. They've never said that. Don't come back. What he said was, if you're here tonight and you're using, try to come back next time before you use. I didn't hear that.
Right.
I heard don't come back. And that's what I wanted to hear, right? But by the time I walked into the treatment facility in High Point, I had no choice but to go back. I was at the end of the road. I was at the last house on the left. We have a mental institution in the middle of the state of Rhode Island. It houses the local penitentiary and whatever, the prison systems. And they used to call it the IMH, the Institute of Mental Health. I don't know what they call it now, Pastore Center or something of that nature. But we used to have a building on there called Benjamin Rush. And I can remember after a weekend away, on the Monday, I was supposed to be in high school because it was getting close to graduation, not that I would ever graduate. And I can remember not going to school, and I can remember calling the vice principal and saying, I'm not coming to school today, I've got a problem with my family. So even then, this is the last day that I would be drinking. I got a problem with my family. I just couldn't see that alcohol and drugs and all that other garbage was my problem. I was still pointing the finger at them, and I just didn't know, right? So I got smashed all day long, and at the end of the day, my friends came over, my friend Mark included, who took me to the school the next morning, and they decided they wanted to watch a movie, so we started watching Pink Floyd The Wall, right? And this is a movie that I'd seen 100 times. I'd seen it in so many different states. I'd seen it on acid, drugs, LSD, mushrooms, stones, drunk. I'd seen it straight. I'd seen this movie in so many ways. But this day was a little bit different, right? I could identify with this poor bastard in the movie, right? He was disconnected from people around him in society. He was living in his own head, and he just couldn't get out. He wanted to get out, but he couldn't get out. He had mother and father issues, right? Which is what I had, mother and father issues from when I was a kid and when they got divorced. And here's the thing. At the end of the movie, he's before a judge, and the judge tells him he's sentencing him after hearing all the evidence by everybody in his life, whether it was his mother, a teacher, a school person, a headmaster, or all this other shit, right? He's telling him that he's going to sentence him. And he sentences him to be exposed before his peers. Something that I'd never done. Because in the entire time that I was drinking, I created a mask. And you never knew what was going on inside me. And I hid it. I medicated it with alcohol and anything else that I can put in my body. I was the neighborhood guinea pig. We rifled through your medicine cabinet, and I took it, and if it was good, I didn't share it with you. Fuck no, I'm keeping that for myself. But if it was all right, I gave you some. It's just leave me alone. That's the kind of alcoholic I was, right? So at the end of the movie, during the trial, the animated part of the trial, it all hit me. It was over. I couldn't run anymore. I couldn't hide from the truth anymore. The reality of my existence in my life was sitting before me in a movie that I'd seen 100 times. And I sat there and I had tears in my eyes and I was crying, and I'll never forget that day. And it was over. The jig was up. And I can remember looking around the room, and all my friends are there from high school, and I'm crying and they're crying, and I'm looking at them and I'm going, what are you crying for? And my friend Mark knows, because I know why you're crying. I said, why the hell am I crying? He goes, because you need help. And that was it. I called home. And I can remember calling my mother and saying, Mom, I want to come home. And I was 18 years old. And she says, you're not coming home unless you get help. And I said, I want help. I'm done. So all those things that she did by putting those people in my life and exposing me to different areas, and the idea that my life could be different and I could recover from this hopelessness, that I could be in a different place and a different person, came to be that weekend. That one meeting that I went to in Narcotics Anonymous, where the guy said, don't come back, the message became clear. I needed to get my shit together, but I didn't know how. But I knew that my neighbor spent 30 days in this treatment facility, and he was a different guy when he came out. He was sober. So I just had to be willing to do this. and I didn't know how. And so when my mother said, you can come home, but you gotta get help, I said, I'm ready to get help. And she said, there's a bed waiting for you tonight. There's a bed at Benjamin Rush, and there's a bed at High Point. Which place would you prefer to go to? I'd heard about Benjamin Rush. I'd heard about the cheesy robes and the styrofoam slippers with the smiley faces and the Thorazine shuffle and living on the prison grounds and all that. And then I'd seen where my friend was at High Point, which was a country club with 2 units and a badminton net and frisbee and a great food in the kitchen and a cafeteria and high-low jack and fudgicles and lots of coffee and horseshoe pits and I could lay in the sun outside and I went for the easier, softer way. I went to High Point. So I went there for 30 days because my father had great kick-ass health insurance and I spent 30 days in High Point. But I can remember saying to my mother, Mom, I want to come home one last night. I just want to spend one night in my bed. And I went home and I spent that night in bed. And the next morning, I woke up and I called my friend Mark, knew exactly what was going on. He was with me all weekend. And I said to him, I need you to take me to the school. I need to tell him what I'm going to do. And he obliged. He took me to the school. And like I said, I had thanked him again this past weekend for doing that for me. And that was the beginning of my journey in Alcoholics Anonymous. I had no idea what was going to happen, but I could tell you that the essence of the first step of Alcoholics Anonymous, being powerless over alcohol and feeling the unmanageability just as a result of that powerlessness, was all on me. That I couldn't even escape it anymore. If whatever kind of delusion I had been living, whatever kind of mask I had been wearing, they were set aside for a little while, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. My mother was under the impression that a better part of my problem had to do with dried goods and things of that nature. Indeed, a lot of it had to do with that. I really love that shit. But a better part of my problem really was alcohol. My whole life was centered around alcohol, from the time I woke up to the time I went to sleep, and even in my dreams in between. So I can remember my mother saying to me, when you see the doctor, make sure you lie about how much you're drinking. I didn't have to lie. I could tell them exactly what I was doing. They didn't kick me out, they let me stay. Maybe it was because the insurance was really damn good and they were gonna get paid, or maybe because they believed the fact that I was indeed somebody who was troubled with alcohol. Who the hell knows? All I know is that I stayed, right? So I stayed there for 30 days, and in the 30 days I learned about Alcoholics Anonymous. I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous. The first speaker I ever identified with was a guy named Stubbs. He was about 4 feet tall, 4 feet wide, appropriately named Stubbs. And he said, my name is Stubbs, and I'm a grateful drunk, and a drunk and a dope fiend, drunk and a junkie. And up until this point, I'd listened to people in Alcoholics Anonymous identify themselves as alcoholics. I didn't get that. I didn't understand what an alcoholic was. I could identify with the word drunk. I could identify with the word junkie. That I could do, right? So I thought it was something weird. I kind of went back to sleep in the meeting while I was there. Then the next guy gets up, and his name was Wes. We used to call him Animal. This was the first group I would belong. It was the 5th Chapter Motorcycle Club. The host group was the Good News Group in Warwick, Rhode Island. This was a million years ago. And Animal gets up and he says, my name is Animal, and I'm a grateful drunk and a dope fiend. And again, I could identify with this guy, and I'm like, there's something about these guys. These aren't the regular highfalutin alcoholics that are like all dressed and shit. These guys are wearing colors and leather, and they came in on their Harleys, and these guys were like real. And they became my family. They introduced me to Alcoholics Anonymous. And they told me I could do anything I wanted to do as long as I stayed sober. And then there was another part of it which I casually pushed aside, and they said, as long as you can live with it. And for a guy like me who comes to Alcoholics Anonymous unprincipled, experiencing that complete, pitiful, and incomprehensible demoralization, I could live with an awful lot when I first got sober, right? I did anything for a drink out there. I did anything sober for a great many years. But I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. They said, don't drink, go to me, join a group, get active, go on commitments, get a sponsor, and things of that nature. My first group said, you'll go through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, or we'll shoot your kneecaps off. When they celebrated anniversaries, Cowboy Bob showed up with 245s on his hips. Stubbs wore a nun outfit. The Hollies ran the whole length of the parking lot at St. Paul's in Warwick. And these people were animals. And they had names like Cowboy, Bear, Wingnut, Dealer, Mongo, Mango. It went on and on and on and on. And these guys were just like absolutely unbelievable. We never ate an anniversary cake. They threw them at each other. And so they said, you go through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous or we'll shoot your kneecaps off. And I believed them. So I went through the 12 steps. But I'm sorry to say that I didn't go through that book, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was a different persuasion, a different method. It was a persuasion and a method that failed to bring to me the spiritual experience that I needed to have as an alcoholic. And for a great many years in Alcoholics Anonymous, I suffered. And as a result of suffering, by not having a spiritual experience, everyone else around me suffered too. In other words, my conscience didn't show up for a great many years, right? So I only have about 5 minutes left, 10 minutes left to tell you about this spiritual experience. I stayed sober. I got married. I got divorced. I had a daughter. Swore I would never have another kid. Then I swore I'd never get married. I think I heard God laugh. I got married. I did have another child, and then another child came with that marriage. So if you can't keep up, it goes hers, mine, and ours. We have 3 beautiful children. I gained a great many things in Alcoholics Anonymous. I had businesses. I lost businesses, and then I got more businesses, and I lost businesses. I grew to have some really great stuff in my life, those trappings. I had some really cool pets, matching Labradors, a couple of cool cats and shit like that. Great houses, apartments, things of that nature. In other words, life went on. But the thing that didn't change was what was going on inside my head and my heart when I first got sober, or long before I started drinking. I can tell you that as a result of going through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, as they're outlined in that big book, I came to understand that long before I started drinking, I experienced a violent separation from God. It's that easy. I was taught and raised to have faith, pray, and believe in God. It started here in this church. But something happened, and I found it when I went through that 12 steps. When I did the 4 steps, I found that exact moment in time when that violent separation happened. If you look at those 12 steps on the wall, I spoke to the first step of Alcoholics Anonymous. I spoke to the alcohol part. It took me 40 minutes to tell you the long version of my story. I can tell you the short version of my story and the rest of those 11 steps in 10 minutes because it was that easy. Because in those 11 steps, they don't even speak to alcohol. In the second step, they speak to a power greater than ourselves. In the third step, they speak to a God as we understand him. In the 5th step, they speak to God. In the 6th step, they speak to God. But the miracle is in the 7th step where it says, humbly ask him. See what happens between 2 and 7? I'm going from HP, yo, doorknob, balloon floating in the air, my sponsors, my higher power, to recognizing that God is real and that I can have a really familiar relationship and call him him instead of HP, right? And to remind me of all of this, in the 11th step, it says, God as we understand him one more time, just to show us how our understanding of God can change between steps 3 and 11. There's your miracle in Alcoholics Anonymous. And with all this, I can go out there and tell you about my spiritual experience, which is what I'm supposed to be doing here tonight, right? So at 26 plus years sober in the halls of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was ready to retire. I was dying in Alcoholics Anonymous and I didn't know. I didn't come upon or bump into that God consciousness that I had as a little kid that was thrown aside and violently ripped from me. I didn't find it in AA for north of 26 years sober. I grew to a place, if you looked at my life, and you saw my beautiful wife and 3 children and the business and the cars and the clothes and the house and all this stuff, the matching dogs and all this, you'd say, wow, this guy's got it made. I was dying in the halls of Alcoholics Anonymous of what they call spiritual disease. It was a spiritual illness. My problem had nothing to do with alcohol. Alcohol became a medication. Alcohol became a serious problem. Yeah, I became an alcoholic. I can't go back to being a non-alcoholic. But my problem was deeper than that. My problem was exactly what they described in that book, and I didn't even know it because nobody talked about it in Alcoholics Anonymous. The greatest message was don't drink and go to meetings. Keep coming back. Well, that's a wonderful message. It's a useful message. It has to be said. But there's more to this in Alcoholics Anonymous. Those 12 steps are absolutely amazing. And to share the idea of a spiritual experience and what it was like is the intent, I think, of the 12th step of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I joined a group up in North Scituate, rural part of the state, ready to retire. I'm done. I'm not going Alcoholics Anonymous anymore. Had a telephone pole picked out that I could wrap my Land Rover around. I was carrying a pistol in my pocket, even though I didn't have a permit to do so. I was dry firing it into the roof of my mouth and up the side of my head, practicing my exit from this world sober, while thinking that there's no solution. Didn't even have a thought to what it would be like if I left here for my wife and my children, never mind the dogs and the cats. I just didn't even care. I was numb. I was dead inside. I didn't know. And then this group of guys came in one night and they were speaking about that book. This group of guys that I had known for years in Alcoholics Anonymous who used to hold that book in just as much contempt that I did. I held that book in contempt for the longest time. As a matter of fact, when I got sober, they said the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is good for two things. If you can't sleep, read it, it'll put you to sleep. And if you can't go to a meeting, read the stories in the back, it'll be like going to a meeting. It's somewhat true until you have a spiritual experience. After you have a spiritual experience and you start working with others and carrying that message, that book is your life. It comes to life, it becomes your life, and it's the way of life, right? At least that's what happened to me. So I reached out to someone and said, will you please take me through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous? And his reply was simple. It would be my honor. It's the same words that I speak to when somebody asks me to take them through that book. It would be an honor. So we started at the front cover of the book. I didn't have a problem with step one. I didn't have a problem with unmanageability. What I came to understand that the powerlessness in my life and the unmanageability in my life is not only related to alcohol, but is wholly related to spiritual sickness and spiritual illness, the spiritual malady that they speak to in that book. And I didn't know at what depths and levels until I got past that third step decision to turn my life and will over to the care of God and get into the fourth step. For 23 days, I wrote like an animal my fourth step. That little bump that's on your finger in high school that went away all those years later, it came back. It was in my middle finger. Every time I looked at it, every time I wrote, it was like I was flipping myself off while I was writing. It was amazing, right? And then I did my fifth step, and it lasted 3 nights, somewhere between 15, 17 hours. And realistically, the greatest way that I can describe it is say that it was kind of like an exorcism. I was taking everything that was dark inside of me, in my heart, my soul, and my head, and putting it out on a table in front of another human being and God. And at the sixth step, where it simply says we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, it was one simple question. Are you done living this way? And if you are, move to step 7 and ask God to take it all away. And I did. And I struck out on those amends. And I didn't think that I would ever be able to get through those amends and pay back all the damages that I had done. I never thought that I could recover from $1 million in debt with properties being repossessed or whatever they call that, foreclosed and vehicles being repossessed all over the place. I didn't think I could recover from it. My credit score was like in the 400s. I don't even know how low you can go, but it was low. And I thought that this was impossible. But I really had no choice. The book tells us we can go on to the bitter end, blotting out the intolerable situation, consciousness of our intolerable situation, or pick up the kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. And that's what I did. It was a lot of continued personal inventory, a lot of setting rights, wrongs as I went by. It was a lot of prayer and meditation. And the most important element of all of this was the idea of sharing the spiritual experience with others and helping them to find the message that was lost on me for so many years. At the beginning, I said, my hope is that you find what was casually pushed aside and kept from us in the 80s. I hope you find it sooner than what it took me. Because if I look back and catalog my life sober in those 26 years, and I look in the eyes of every single person that was in my life, whether they were in Alcoholics Anonymous or outside of Alcoholics Anonymous, family, non-family, I see a look in their eyes that is pain that I caused. And I will carry it for the rest of my life. And my endeavor will be to carry out the 12th step of Alcoholics Anonymous as a way of penance and paying back to the best of my ability for the rest of my life. So where is my life now with this spiritual experience? On November 22nd in 2012, just 10 years ago, this week, on Thanksgiving morning, I rolled out of bed and humbly asked God to remove my shortcomings after I finished that 3 nights of the 5th step. When I did this, my entire life changed. The 3rd step and the 7th step should come with a little warning that says, fasten your seatbelt. The 7th step should say, fasten your harness because you're about to go for a hell of a ride. My life today is beyond my wildest dreams. My wife wanted to hit me with divorce papers and throw me out the door and was ready to toss my ass out. I was losing my business. I was losing everything in my life, and my relationships were strained everywhere. My life today is absolutely amazing in respect to my marriage. My wife and I speak of spiritual things on a daily basis, and my marriage has never been better. She stuck by me, and she's just absolutely amazing. There are many mornings when I wake up and I'll look at her and I'll simply say, wow, you're still here. Okay. And she'll simply say, I'm still here, right? What happened was I was able to have that spiritual experience and recover from that hopeless state of mind and body. My spirit has been reborn. I'm able to live an entirely different life. And as a result of that, the way that I used to live my life by damaging people, I have a way of being something that's stronger to people and by helping people heal. This is a role that I did not choose. I did not wake up one day and said, I think I want to go help people heal. My way of living is selfishness and self-centeredness. I only think of me. But that book came to life and showed me how to live an entirely different way. You can't beat it. Now, if you're here tonight and anything that I said to you didn't make sense to you, that's cool, because I've been there before too. I would simply say, keep coming, right? Because perhaps there will be a group of guys, a group of women that walk in the room one day with the same message that I gave you tonight, and it might resonate with you, and then you might find the same magic that a lot of us in Alcoholics Anonymous have found. There's a great deal of work to be done here. If you're newly sober, don't hesitate. You do not have to wait 90 days before you write your 4th step. Are you clean? Are you sober? Is your body sober? Good. Is your head still screwed up? Good. Make a decision, go do your writing, go finish your writing, do your 5th step, keep speaking to it, and go out there and make your amends. That's how you get through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Putting it off is not going to do anything but hurt you and hurt everybody else around you. So my message to you tonight is that you can recover from that hopeless state of mind and body. If you want what we have and you're willing to go to any length to get it, then you will be ready to take certain steps. They did not bullshit us in this big book. Everything that they spoke to in that book is just as relevant today as it was decades ago, and that's why that book is still here. That's why at its core, Alcoholics Anonymous is still here. That's why at its core, Alcoholics Anonymous allows us 12 other principles to guide us as a society, and then 12 other principles to guide us worldwide. 36 divine principles to make Alcoholics Anonymous what it is today. And not one person in Alcoholics Anonymous can tear that apart. We're not strong enough. God is. Thanks, guys.